Hey, Dan here, and in this video I want to share why I originally moved to Europe, and more importantly, in taking up the chunk of the video, is what it's actually like to live in Europe. And this is coming from a Canadian perspective, and that might be similar to an American perspective as well. So in terms of why I actually came to Europe, that part's not that exciting or interesting. Actually, a friend of mine was on his way to do a master's program, which took him in 3 different countries throughout Europe. And at the time, I was completing my dream of living in 5 different countries before I turned 30. So I'd already lived in Costa Rica, and then I was living in New York, and that's where my friend was. And he told me he was moving to Hamburg, Germany to do his master's degree, and did I want to make Germany my third new country to move to? And I said, yes, of course, that sounds like a lot of fun. So to give you a bit of perspective, I've been in Europe since 2012, and since then I've lived in Germany, in Berlin and Hamburg. I've lived in Bologna, Italy. I've lived in Barcelona, Spain, and I've been here in Prague in the Czech Republic for about 2 years since. So in each of the countries I spent between 3 months and 2 years, and some in the middle in there. So I think I'm in a position to give a bit of an overview of living in Europe, because of course every country is different, right? What it's like to live in Prague is going to be very different than what it's like to live in Amsterdam. Actually, no, those two are pretty similar. But some other countries, right, or cities, it might be quite a bit different. But I've lived in enough different European countries to get a feeling for some of the common differences. The first thing that really stands out is you have a lot more uniform culture. So despite Europe being really packed together and having the opportunity to intermingle and interbreed for the last 2,000 or so years, most countries maintain their culture really well. So if you go to Prague, it is Czech, and there is big differences in how people act and behave. Even within the Czech Republic, you have significant differences between like the north and south or east and west. But Czech Republic is Czech. They are very unique in that way, right? You go to Poland, Polish people are very unique. In Poland especially, they are only Polish people there. Not a lot of immigrants up in Poland. You go to Germany, France, everywhere, the culture is very unique. And they've somehow stuck to that. The French and Spanish haven't just like intermingled over the last 1,000 years and become one culture. They're very different. This leads to my second point, and probably one of my favorite things about living in Europe, is how easy it is to travel and how quickly it is to basically be in like a whole new world, right? Coming from Vancouver, Canada, if I were to hop on a plane and try to go somewhere interesting, like I just needed somewhere new, right? I needed a break. Maybe Mexico I could do. Maybe some parts of the US would be significantly different. Like I could go to New Orleans. Even then I'm talking about a 3 or 4 hour flight, at least $300 probably. And it's still the same language, and the same Wendy's and Burger King and whatever are going to be on every corner. And there's not a lot of change. Whereas from here in Prague, I could get in a car, let alone to fly or take a train. But let's say flying a 1-2 hour flight. Within 2 hours, there's probably 15, 20 different countries I could get to, maybe more. And within those countries, almost every single one is going to have a different language and a different culture. Now, some are somewhat similar to one another, like the Balkans have some similarity between countries, but each one really is a unique culture. That's pretty cool if you're someone who likes to travel, you like novelty, that there's always somewhere new you can go. If you want to take a quick weekend trip to Paris, sweet, no problem. New language, different people, it's a refreshing experience. So that level of travel and diversity of culture is amazing, especially considering that each place, maintains their own unique culture. So that's something I really like about it, and it's a big difference to living in North America or Australia or other places that are speaking English and watching this video, which is primarily just those countries I mentioned. One last point about the travel is it is so easy here. Within Europe, there's what's called the Schengen Zone, which is different than the European Union, and that's not something I'm going to totally get into in this video. But basically, within the Schengen Zone, which is most of Europe, there are no borders. You just go and can go between countries without talking to anyone. Occasionally there's passport checks if you're on a route that has a lot of drug trafficking or human trafficking or something, but generally you don't talk to anyone. So when I'm flying from Prague, I have about a 40-minute ride on the metro from my apartment to the airport. I might leave my house 70 minutes before my flight takeoff without too much stress, because You get to the airport, security lineups are quick, and then you're done. There's no customs, there's no big lineups. It's really easy. Now, of course, this varies by airport, but across the board, every airport here is easier than most of the airports in like the US, right? And so that makes it a lot easier because if you just get to the airport basically when your flight's taking off, you save a ton of time. It's a lot easier to just go on a quick trip. So the last part about living in Europe that's really different is life is about more than money, more than the GDP. And yes, I know this is the cliche, and it's probably not as true as the cliche, right, of Europeans never working or sitting there drinking an espresso all day. But there is a difference in how people look at life. So it's not that Europeans aren't being productive. If you look at the average GDP, which is a measure of basically a country's gross domestic product, how much they produce, countries like France, Germany, the Netherlands, Scandinavia, they have a very similar GDP per capita to the United States. It's slightly lower usually, but it's not a lot lower. So they're producing stuff. They're not all sitting around doing nothing. But even within those cultures, like within Germany, you have roughly 4 weeks minimum of holidays per year, plus about 20 other government holidays. So you've got a minimum of kind of 2 months there. But if you spread it out right, you probably end up with 3. And that's Germany. And when you talk about like work-life balance, the Germans will, when work finishes at 5, they will go out. They will have a beer, relax. They're not sitting in the office all night. Same with like going away on weekends or things like that. Now, of course, there are companies, usually American firms, international firms that get set up in countries like Germany and then bring those crazy work hours to people. But generally, there's a lot bigger balance. People don't look at life as just about how much you make. And this is something I like and hate about Europe. So one of the things that's great about North America is that people are really valued on what they produce, what they do, right? So if someone shows up, they're a poor immigrant and they work really hard, they educate themselves, they make a lot of money, that they will be viewed the same as anyone else who's been successful. There's not like a class system. Europe does have a class system still, which is something I don't necessarily like. But one of the things I do like about the mindset around it is that you're more than your money. If you're some scammy internet marketer asshole and you make a bunch of money ripping people off, you're not viewed as like high class here or anything better because it's not just about the money. It's about, other things in terms of this class system. That's a whole nother discussion perhaps. But going back is that people, like somewhere, say in France, you have a relatively high GDP per person. People are earning money. The standard of living is quite high. And they also take long lunches. They relax. They spend time on things other than just working. And so I personally think this is a really positive thing. It varies by people. I've gotten in an argument with my dad about this where I was trying to argue that because they also have a decent GDP but a way higher quality of life, way more time off, way more like longer lunches, less work hours. I think in France, the mandatory work hours or the maximum, is 35 hours a week by law. Pretty amazing. I was arguing that they have the better deal because their incomes are almost as high, but their quality of life is way better. And he couldn't sort of wrap his head around that. Like he just kept trying to argue about GDP and how their GDP is lower and they have like a 7% unemployment rate, so their economy isn't as good. It's like, yes, but if you go there, people's quality of life is higher and they are happier. So who cares about all these other numbers and metrics? And I'm kind of somewhere in between, like I'm half capitalist, half traveling hippie, and I see both sides. But overall, I think for me, living in Europe has been really good to grind down that capitalist part of me and see that, the balance in life and that there's a lot more there. So that's the third thing you will notice in Europe. There is materialism. There is people driven to just make money, but there's a lot less of it than in North America. A lot less materialism or defining yourself by your wealth or your bank account. I'll make some more videos on this. If you have specific questions, let me know in the comments, or if you'd like me to make a video about one of the countries I've lived in and what it's like or something like that, again, let me know in the comments. If you are not currently living in Europe or living abroad and you're looking to have that freedom to live somewhere new, to become an expat, then I would encourage you to subscribe to the channel here and maybe also head over to my website, because I do a lot of content on making your own freelancing business or working for yourself in general, so that you can actually have that freedom to live abroad. And that's what's allowed me to live in Europe for the last 5 years without having to worry about getting a job or anything, is I've just been freelancing, working with clients around the world, and I can just live where I want, which is pretty cool, and I'd be happy to help you do the same. So subscribe to the YouTube channel and on my website as well if you want to know more about that. Thanks for watching.